So training effectively for strength. What's it all about? How can we maximize it, and how can we get the best results that we could possibly want? Well, strength training effectively comes down to the three main things. So you have periodization, which bring it down into micro, meso, and macro cycles, and we'll get onto that further into this. Broken down into SAID, specific adaptations to imposed demands, and then the third is stress recovery adaptation. That's your SRA, and then fatigue management comes inside that as well. So each of these principles govern a distinct but complementary aspect of training design, and together they form the foundation of all high performance strength programming. So we'll start with specificity. We'll go here. So SAID, specific adaptations to imposed demands. What is it? So the body adapts specifically to the type and magnitude of stress placed upon it. In strength sports, you get stronger in the exact movements you do, muscle groups and intensities you consistently train them at. In a nutshell, that just means whatever way you train it is the way you're going to adapt. If you're training for speed all the time, you're going to get faster, but that doesn't necessarily mean you're going to get stronger. But the key concepts are broken down into four main points. So key concepts for your SAID. Movement. So movement is just training competition lifts and variations that reinforce weak points. You train your main lifts, you get better at your main lifts. Yeah? You're training these movements consistently, you're going to get better at carrying out those movements. Next is your muscular and your neural. So repeated exposure to the same motor patterns improves recruitment, coordination, and neural efficiency. What does that mean? In a nutshell, if you train your main lifts become easier to perform. You're more coordinated. Your body adapts to it better and recruits more muscle because it understands the movement it's about to carry out. And your mind doesn't have to work as hard to understand exactly what it is doing. It becomes a lot easier to think of it very similarly to muscle memory. Load and velocity is up next. So heavy, low velocity training develops maximal strength. Lighter, fast lifts develop speed and power, as I said previously. So you need to match the load to the lift demands. If you're wanting to get faster at a lift, there's no point having a heavy, slow weight. It's not going to happen. Let's say you're doing something like deadlifts and you want to get your lockout better, and you're like, okay, well, I'll do raised deadlifts, do them off a platform, a couple inches up off the knee, and I'll just get that lockout going. But you do it with an incredibly high weight. You're doing it for 2 or 3 reps. You're like, well, if I get really strong in this movement, that means I'm going to be really good at it. Not necessarily, because you want to get fast. Your goal is to get fast. You want to worry about getting quick. And by doing that, you have to go with lighter, faster movements. You have to train light, fast movements. Again, going back up to our movement up here, train competition lifts and variations that reinforce weak points. Number 4 is joint angle. Can be a confusing one for a lot of people, but adaptations occur most strongly within the ranges of motion trained. So if you practice full competition standard range of motion with complete form, you're going to have a complete lift. It's as simple as that. And I will even go over and we can talk a wee bit about the applications of each of these to strength training. So if we say training focused of a squat, yeah, practical example of that is a low bar squat 2 times a week. But then we still have pause squats implemented to address sticking points. Again, with the bench, you could have competition bench, normal. You could also be implementing a close grip bench as well. I'll refer back. You've got your competition bench, movement, competition bench, muscular and neural, repeated exposure to the same motor patterns, improves recruitment, coordination, and neural efficiency. You're doing the main movement consistently every week. You're going to get better at carrying out. Load and velocity isn't exactly specified in here, but it would be when working with a coach with a better understanding of exactly what you're trying to achieve in that moment. Then again, joint angle. Adaptations occur most strongly within the range of motion trained. So practice full comp standard range of motion. On the other side, close grip bench. You could be also trying to train on a very slightly different range of motion to improve your tricep strength through a close grip bench. Different range of motions can have benefits for different things. Next is the deadlift. So conventional or sumo deadlifts plus a block / deficit work. Yeah, same exact thing as the bench. You're training your main lift, either conventional or sumo, you're training your main lift, your movement, your muscular and neural. And then you're doing block and deficit work to try and improve different range of motions of the movement. So as I said before, with the lockout in the deadlift, you could be doing block pulls on that there to help improve that range of motion of it and that area exactly of the movement. Last is your neural. Sub-maximal technique sessions with perfect form. Think of it like a deload day or a deload week where you are, really lowering your weights, but you're looking at as best technique as you can and consistently doing it with perfect form over that week and just really getting these in. Brings us back to our muscular and neural. Repeated exposure to the same motor patterns improves recruitment, coordination, neural efficiency. Train main lifts means that your main lifts are going to become easier to perform. Now, what is the purpose of all of these? So it directs you what to train, and it ensures every exercise, every set, every rep contributes to sport-specific strength. And this applies to anything you're doing. I've put it in the context of powerlifting because that's my background. That's what I know best. I train clients that do powerlifting and they would benefit very much from this. But it applies for any sport-specific training where you're maybe working towards strength. So we will move on from that and we'll go into periodization. Periodization is a very overlooked principle of strength training, at least mainly for people who don't understand fully what it is and what they're doing and how to really properly progress when their main focus is strength. A lot of people have some progressive overload, just put heavier weights on each week. Correct, it will benefit you, but periodization is extremely important when it comes to long-term cycles, and I'll get to that. So, what is periodization? Periodization is the structured manipulation of training variables. So that could be intensity, volume, exercise selection, etc. And you're doing that across time to optimize your performance as much as you can, manage your fatigue as much as you can, and make sure you're peaking your strength at the right moments in a competition setting. The key concepts for periodization: progressive structure, it has cyclical variation, and it is very purposeful sequencing. We'll start with progressive structure. As I mentioned with progressive overload, very similar. So training evolves through planned phases, each building upon the last. Planned progress equals correct structure and a correct process. Yeah. Can be quite easily misunderstood for progressive overload because it isn't quite, but it is a very similar, but not quite similar form of it. Let me get to it. You are progressing over a long period of time, and as it says, your training evolves through planned phases, each building upon the last. So I work my programs through blocks. Your first block is a volume block. It's an accumulation phase, getting your body more used to handling loads and getting much better at handling the stress of the lifts. Yeah. From then, you can move into a strength block, but the volume is lower, but the intensity of the lifts is much higher. And that is building and building from there. And then from a strength block, you'll move on to maybe a peak. Say we're going for a competition, you'll maybe go to a peak. That strength block leads directly into your peak. Just again, decreased volume, increased intensity. Next is the cyclical variation. So volume and intensity are cycled to stimulate continuous adaptation while preventing burnout. So cycling equals always progressing and always enjoying. So in a nutshell, this is your longer term cycles in terms of your thinking every 4 weeks. You're thinking every 4 weeks there's something being changed. This is making sure that, that your training doesn't grow stale. You're not getting bored of what you're doing as you would in a standard sort of progressive overload environment of just put more on every week. Everything you're doing has progressive structure, but it is using a cyclical variation to make sure it is ever changing, but still providing the correct structure and the correct progression while keeping you entertained, keeping you engaged with your training, as it says, preventing burnout and ensuring that you're just enjoying your training overall. Next is purposeful sequencing. So earlier phases develop general qualities. So work capacity and hypertrophy, that's your volume blocks, that's your accumulation phases. While later phases refine specific qualities. So maximal strength and your peaking. I put down the early phases are future proof. The early phases are going to build on what you do long term. Your work capacity, your hypertrophy is going to have an impact on your strength in the future. This could also be a very detailed look at form. That's going to have a massive impact on how you progress down the line as well. Future proofing. Later phases are just making you turn up in the best condition possible. So making sure you're at maximal strength, making sure you're peaked correctly. Usually a bit shorter term, as a peak is shorter term. Moving on from there, look at some common periodization models. As I've said, I use the block. Just find it easier. Whenever I was training myself and I was working with coaches, I have been put through a linear phase of periodization, and I find it worked just as well. Personally, I prefer the block method. I think it just works a lot better. As we were going back with the cyclical variation, it is very engaging. It keeps you up to date all the time. Everything's changing. It doesn't feel as long term. It doesn't get as stale. But linear. So gradual increase in intensity and a decrease in volume over time. I would have done this in my deadlifts, where I would have done a double and then back off some triples, and that would have been me for 6 weeks, deload, another 6 weeks, same thing. That was it. That was my deadlift program for pretty much the majority of the time I powerlifted. And that is a linear periodization model. It still works, it's still fine. It's just linear. As it says, it's in the name, it's very linear, but it's also quite boring. Next is an undulating periodization model. So frequent variation in load and rep schemes within a week. So this is when you could maybe be doing, let's say, end of your strength block, you'd be doing a 3x3 and a 4x4 in the same week, squatting twice. First day, 4x4. Start of the week, end of the week, you'd be doing a 3x3, and then progressing that into the next week, we'd be starting with a 3x3, going into a 2x2, or going down to singles, etc. It's very much just focused on week, and it's a slightly different way of progressing the loads than you would in a linear or a block phase. But what is the block phase? So it is a subsequential focus on distinct qualities. So hypertrophy, strength, and your power peak mainly is what it is. So what do I do? 4 weeks of an accumulation phase, volume phase, then 4 weeks of a strength phase, and then you'll be doing your 4-week working on power and your peak. Easy done. Changes every 4 weeks. At least personally, I do it every 4 weeks. Make sure you're always changing up, always doing something different, always progressing. By the end of every block, you're like, this is going well, this is going good. Keeps you engaged, keeps you focused. You're enjoying your training. What is the purpose now of periodization? So it determines when and how to train, but also ensures long-term progression and readiness for competition testing. So it always has you on a upward trajectory of you're always moving forward to some form of goal. And it's always everything you do, whether it's within the linear or the undulating or the block, you're always setting yourself up for the future and progressively getting up and up and up and getting better and better and better, you know, every 4 weeks or every 2 weeks or every 1 week, depending on which one you go through. If you go undulating, you could be lifting a heavier weight in the same week. Next is your SRA, so stress, recovery, and adaptation. So every training session applies stress. We know this. And that there requires recovery before any of the adaptations can actually occur from adaptations just being strength gain in this regard. So it's important that proper timing between these phases leads to continual improvement. Imbalances leads to stagnation or regression from your progress. If we go further down, a lot of this will be explained. So stress. So training sessions disrupt homeostasis. It's just muscle microtrauma and CNS fatigue is all that really is. So disrupted homeostasis, muscle damage, CNS damage. Your body's not going to want to lift as much as it can normally lift. You're going to be sore. You don't want that. You don't want that at all. But this is the process that happens after those maxes and after that max out at the start of your peak week. And then you spend the next few days, the next week, recovering. And then let's say you're going on stage. Yeah, this process is extremely important for that process specifically. And we'll get to that. So you've hit your max. You've induced the stress. Your training session disrupts homeostasis. You've now got muscle microtrauma. Your CNS is a bit damaged. You're not feeling great. But you'll be okay because you're going to start recovering. You're going to start recovering now. So nutritional intake, sleep, and the rest restore function. Just key principles of recovery. Keep them in check. Everything's going to go smooth here. You're just going to let yourself recover as normal. Which then allows now for adaptations to occur. And this is when it becomes vital for this to be a big part of your peak. So whenever you recovered, your body begins to adapt. Your body actually super compensates for the stress that it was put under. And you actually end up returning stronger and more resilient. So your body adapts and you end up stronger than you were previously. And that is really just how a peak works. Really just how a peak works. Because you're just in this stress, you're allowing your body to recover and these adaptations to occur. And then your body super compensates. And then whenever you're actually on stage, you're fully recovered, your CNS is firing, but you're actually stronger and more resilient because your body is overcompensated for the stress that was put under the week prior. It's a very rough detail of recovery timelines. So let's say a lift of a squat, your SRA curve is going to be about 48 to 72 hours before you recover. Optimal training frequency per week is 2 to 3 times a week, just going off these numbers, how long it's going to take you to recover from that. Bench press is going to be 24 to 48 hours. Way faster. This is a common trend. That's why people can bench 3 times a week, 4 times a week, because as it says, optimal training frequency between 3 and 4, because you can recover. And if you can recover fast enough and you can do the extra volume, then you may as well do it. You will benefit. Next is deadlifts, which takes the longest. So it's 72 to 96 hours. And this is really why you can only do it 1 to 2 times a week. I don't think I've ever deadlifted more than once a week. Just paired with the squat and stuff, I would always said one of these needs to be at least 1. And usually it's going to be deadlift. Squats, maybe up to 2. Bench press, you can do 2, 3, 4, whatever suits you best. So next is fatigue management. Very self-explanatory. But the key concepts are deloads, auto-regulation, recovery practices, and monitoring fatigue. Down at the bottom there, you can also see advanced considerations, which are going to come into play in just a wee minute. But we'll start with deloads. So deloads in a nutshell are just planned reductions in load and volume to restore your performance. They're usually done every 4 to 6 weeks. Just really there to reset your body back to zero in terms of any fatigue that may be carrying over, any CNS damage that may have still been carrying over or lingering on from maybe a very intense blog, or maybe you didn't recover quite well from your accumulation phase, maybe slightly overdid it. Deload could be in play. Good program will have these scheduled and ready to go already, taking everything into consideration. Next is auto-regulation. So you have adjusting daily load using RPE or bar velocity feedback through videos, or if you're one-to-one looking at it. If you're doing this yourself, use your own RPE and understand it, and then make sure you're recording your own feedback and going over it, looking at it, checking it. How fast is this bar moving in comparison to normal? You're regulating yourself here. Recovery practices, so prioritizing sleep, 7 to 9 hours. High protein nutrition, hydration, and low stress days are all very important, but those are all very typical recovery practices, but they should very much so be taken into account whenever you're competing or if you're trying to take this sort of training very seriously. Next is monitoring fatigue. Very self-explanatory again. Use training logs, RPE trends, bar speed feedback, mood, and readiness markers. If you're doing this yourself, get this in a Google Doc and get it made. And make sure you're logging consistently. If you're working with a coach, this should all be taken into account anyway. Some don't use RPE, some rather use bar speed. It's fine. It's entirely up to the person. Readiness markers are a big one as well. What's your sleep been like? What's your eating been like? Etc. How ready are you to actually take on this lift? But now, advanced considerations down at the bottom, and it is adaptive resistance. So, what is adaptive resistance? So, adaptive resistance is if a stimulus no longer produces any adaptation at all. You need to vary training stress within the bounds of specificity. So, for example, pause squats or tempo lifts to reinitiate adaptations. So, it's a very small change in the stimulus to ensure that your body continues to adapt to what you're doing to it. If you're doing a certain lift and your body's not really adapting and you're not finding any progression, usually that's a sign, okay, let's bring adaptive resistance into this. Let's change what we're doing here to try and reinitiate those adaptations. And then we can go back again in a few weeks' time. And we will definitely see the benefits. So the purpose of all of that there is really just to balance how much and how often you train and ensuring recovery supports continued progression without overtraining. Overtraining is going to leave you in a pit and it is definitely going to damage everything for you. So you do not want to be overtraining. You want to be taking into consideration your fatigue, making sure you're hitting your recovery practices, making sure you're doing your all regulation and really looking back on your lift and thinking, was I ready for that? Is that good? Is this the right RPE? Should this bar be moving a wee bit faster than that? All regulating yourself, taking a look back and really giving yourself feedback. If you're working with a coach, giving them feedback. And then deloads again as well. Massive. Bringing deloads in. Balance how much and how often to train, ensuring recovery supports continued progression without overtraining. Deloads going to be massive for it. Planned reduction of load and volume to restore performance. Literally has it to a T. Every 4 to 6 weeks, feeling a bit crap, have a deload. Sort it out. Now that there finishes me off for all of this. For now, there will be an expanded PDF to be put out very soon, covering all of this in more detail and in a slightly more user-friendly manner where you can't just read through your own pace. So I would advise everyone, give me a shout if you're interested in that. I'll be happy enough to send it over. And other than that, that was training effectively for strength. And thank you very much for watching.